Hey, it's Sarah Burke here from the Women in Media podcast. And before we get started on a new episode, could I get you to hit like, follow, subscribe, hit the bell, whichever app you do your podcast listening in. Make sure you're all set up so you know when there's a new episode and you can help spread the word. Oh, and if you're so inclined, could I ask you to leave a review if the app that you're using does that? You're the best. All right, let's get to the show. I'm Sarah Burke, and this is the Women in Media podcast. My next guest is the host of iHeartRadio Nights and the evening show on Chum 104.5 here in Toronto. She actually came out on the radio, but she wasn't always comfortable to share her story.
For many years in radio, I was telling stories, but I was using gender neutral terms in order to not, so I was kind of finding my way around it. And with that comes a lot of shame and a lot of guilt. And you always have to second guess everything that you're saying. And there's just a lot of weight to that. So it wasn't until I just felt like I was at a point where I was like, okay, listen, I'm just going to openly be myself. I'm going to talk about the things that are important to me. I'll still even get backlash, but it's really just fired me up to talk about it even more.
I personally believe my guest, Shannon Burns, is the future of radio. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much. What an intro.
There's a time in my life where I thought I was the next generation of radio, but I look at what you're doing. You are all over the place right now, and your interviews are stellar. You're probably the TikTok coach for radio people in Canada.
I kind of feel like it right now. I've a lot of my meetings throughout the last couple of weeks have been with stations going through TikTok things. So yeah, I feel like a little bit of a coach, but I'll take that title proudly.
So for the pandemic specifically, work for you has been sort of a mix between iHeartRadio, your evening show on Chum, and then gaining millions of followers on TikTok. So in your day-to-day right now, what does, the priority go to when you have so many things on the go?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I do feel like I keep filling my list with so many different things that I'm doing, and then I constantly am just trying to do all of the different things. But I host 2 radio shows a day. So I host one that's a syndicated show for iHeartRadio that airs on all the Virgin radios across Canada, and a few Sun FMs in there as well. So during the day, that's my main priority. At the end of the day, I'm a radio host through and through. So that's what I really put my focus on. And then every night from 7 to 10, I do my show on Chum. So those are the things that I want to do and succeed really well with. And then any extra time that I have after that goes to everything else. So anytime that I can find a few minutes in my day, that's when I'm focusing that on TikTok and making online content. And then that's already after doing all the prep for the interviews that I have that week. And yeah, the full other list of things that I have going on.
So the syndication, I actually haven't had a conversation about syndication on this podcast yet. So I think a lot of people think right now it's a scary time to be in radio because, there's just less of the pie to go around. So with your syndicated show versus your live show, explain the difference of how you're preparing for both those shows.
Yeah. So the syndicated show, because it is across Canada, it's a little bit harder to prep because I'm pre-recording the show, which makes it seem like it's an easier thing to do. But because it's airing on 15 stations, I don't know what song I'm coming out of. I don't know what song I'm going into. So it's hard to do artist specific breaks, which is also difficult because I'm doing top 40 radio. So I want to be talking about all these artists that I generally know that the station is playing. So that there's a little bit of a struggle with that. And also just the fact that it's not a local show either. It's Canada wide. So I can't specifically talk about one story that I might talk about that happened in Toronto on my Chum show. So I have to definitely just make it more broad. So it really forces me to be more creative in a lot of ways and maybe talk about things that I wouldn't necessarily talk about and keep it really broad. But there's struggles with that, but it's a good challenge. I pre-record that show during the day, and then I have that in by 3 p.m. because of it airing in so many different markets. They have to get it into each station at a certain time for the producers to put into the system. And then I just do a regular live evening show on Chum in Toronto. So
do you find that you can recycle some of the material because at least you're covering the same format genre?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes people are tuning into both my shows and they're like, oh, you told the same story. And I'm like, well, it was a big story that day. And I didn't want to not talk about it on one in order to talk about it on the other. So I'll try and just separate it time wise because the syndicated show does also air in Toronto. So I'll just put one in the beginning of my Chum show and the other will air near the end of my Virgin show or whatever.
So how long have you been in radio?
2013, 2014. So what's the math on that? Yeah,
we went to radio school, right? So don't ask me. But
don't want to do that.
8 years? I want to say
8 years. Yeah, about 8 years now. So yeah.
the radio landscape has changed dramatically in the last 10 years. And, even things that I think about now, like how I might have been one of the first like radio hosts in London, Ontario on Twitter. I think about it now and I'm like, now I have no idea how to use TikTok, really. I've done like 2 things. So how do you bring the trends of technology and social media to your show? How do you try to integrate?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel like I've always noticed with getting into radio is that how important social media was as a part of radio, because a downside to radio is that a lot of people can't see our faces, which is good because you get that intimacy on a level. But I always find once people know what I look like and once people have seen me or follow me on social media, it really adds to that connection and that relationship that I have with the listener. So I always have been trying to figure out ways to like integrate social media with the show as well in order to like form that whole like community of people. So TikTok I found was like the perfect key to do that with, because I started showing off different aspects of my life. And as soon as people started to piece together, they're like, oh, your voice sounds really familiar. Or like, oh, I listen to that station all the time. And they think it's so cool that like Chum is on TikTok and things like that. I noticed that people were really into that. So I was like, oh, I want to like feed into that. Like, how can I make that grow? So I started just really making a lot of my content on TikTok, like radio focused and showing behind the scenes of radio and like playing games with my followers on TikTok.
I love your games on TikTok. So funny.
And because they say it's like so important to like engage on TikTok as it is on radio. So I was like, okay, what's a way that I can like engage with my TikTok followers, but then like integrate it into my show. So then I had people like on TikTok comment like a secret word that I have to like somehow sneak into my radio show. So, which is great because it's kind of like an inside joke with all of my TikTok followers because they know what I'm doing and they see it on TikTok, but anybody that's listening to the radio would have no idea that any of that is
and they're
going
like,
on.
why is this girl talking about chapstick or whatever?
Yeah.
I love the chapstick one where you had to put on chapstick. Like,
oh yeah. Yeah. Cause now I feel like I'm getting a little bored of the code words. They're not yet. So I'm surprised by that, but I was like, I want to do something else. So now it's turned into like a lot of dares. So now there's just like things that I'm starting to do in the studio. While I'm on air.
What if it turns into truth or dare?
Then I'm screwed.
So you were actually nominated to come on this podcast by one of your coworkers, Meredith Shaw. And I love how, that's someone who's been in her role and a well-known personality for quite some time, sort of like giving kudos to the next generation.
Right.
When you were first getting into radio, was there anyone who really like took you under their wing and showed you the ropes?
Yeah, I feel like there's lots of people like throughout my career. I feel like I really thrive off of like getting feedback from other people or just like bouncing ideas off of people. So I really have like a group of friends in radio that I'm constantly going to. But yeah, there's always people like on the rise, but I'm found specifically in Toronto because we are such like a close-knit group with like Virgin and Chum and everything. And there's just so many women that I found it's just like such a supportive environment. So I really feel like I can like go to anyone as like a way of like mentorship. But Meredith is somebody, for example, who like from the moment that I started at Chum, I was just like bright-eyed, like so excited to be in Toronto. That was like always my goal in radio. And I had moved, I'm from this area, but I moved to Alberta for like 5 years in order to get experience in radio. So making it to Toronto was like always the goal. And she's somebody that right away like took me under her wing, and we've always been there to help each other. Like I'll edit a video for her, but she'll like style me for an event, and we'll like use each other's skills to like help each other out. And I think there's so many great people that I know that that do things like that and help each other out. So yeah, it's been really good.
Cool. So you started in Alberta. What was it also CHR or Top 40?
Yeah. So I moved as soon as I was finishing up school. We had to do like an internship in order to graduate. So everybody always said that like Toronto is not, you can't just like expect to get into Toronto right away. So, and they're like, it helps if you like go to a smaller town or whatever. And I was kind of looking for like an adventure. So I applied at a bunch of stations out west, and I ended up getting one just like as an intern and helping out in the promo department for the station's now called Play 107. It's like a Harvard station.
Cool.
So I worked there. I ended up becoming their like promotions coordinator, and I was doing a little bit of on-air stuff for them for about a year. And then I was offered a job hosting, like co-hosting a morning show of a rock station for a Rogers station in Medicine Hat, Alberta, which is like a town. I think there's like 50,000 people or something. I'm not a rock girl at all. I'm like a pop girl through and through. So that was such a challenge for my first show, but yeah, a good challenge to have.
Wow. I always find I've had the best lessons learned coming out of a format I'm not necessarily comfortable with.
Oh, totally.
as a rock girl I launched a pop channel on Sirius XM last summer, and that was a learning curve for sure.
Yeah, it definitely puts you out of your like comfort levels, but I feel like yeah, that's always the best challenge. And they had me doing news and sports, which is just like only getting further away from everything that I know. So I'm glad that that all happened when I was in like a very small town with no one that I knew, so I could just go and embarrass myself and be bad. And then I was only there for about 8 months, and then I got a job at Virgin Radio Edmonton, so I ended up moving back to Edmonton. So I felt like that was pretty good, because by the time that I got back to Edmonton and did my own show, I was like, okay, I do have some experience now. I've like, yeah, done all of that stuff, gotten all the nerves out, and now I can just like grow.
Yeah. It's funny what you're saying, even about sports. It's like you have to somehow find a way to align with the station brand, like in your personality. Too.
Yeah.
So I feel like, Virgin and iHeartRadio and Chum, those are very good fits for you. What do you love about aligning with those brands?
The reason that I got into radio in the first place is because I never felt like I was really good at anything. But the thing that always I was so interested in was pop culture and just like the celebrity world and Hollywood and movies and all of that stuff. So because that's what I felt like I was good at, I wanted to find a career path that would let me use those skills in some way. So radio seemed like such a good fit for that. And I just like to talk a lot. So it was, yeah, it was easy. But yeah, so it was all those things that I loved about it, and I just feel like that's like the only information that I like hold on to. So, and I love being like the first person to like tell a story. Like if something happens, some weird celebrity scandal or something, I'm always like the first one in my group chat being like, did you guys see that this happened? And people are like, no way, that's crazy. And then I always get like satisfaction out of that. So I think being a radio host and being able to like share those stories, and even now like make TikToks about those stories, and people jump in on the conversations and all of that and help lead that, then I just get like such a kick out of it. So
how much are you talking about your personal life on the air? So, I mean, like just from watching, let's say your social media, someone who doesn't really know you, I can tell that you have a partner that doesn't live in Canada, and you're open about your relationship.
Yeah. So I'm trying to, on air, I find it's a little bit harder than on social media, because on social media, it's there to be yourself and you're showing off parts of your life. But I'm trying to do it more and more with on air. But I also I struggle with, I'm like, okay, how much do people actually care about like my girlfriend that lives in Chicago and the border's closed and we haven't seen each other in a year? But I think and how relatable is that of a situation to be in? But yeah, whatever I get a good response from is kind of like what I'll feed into more. So if like people find interest in that, like I find on TikTok and things, people are very intrigued and they have a lot of questions about the fact that my girlfriend lives in Chicago, and different aspects of my life, and especially with being gay. So then I'll talk more about that if people are interested in that, or if people reach out, like a lot of young people will be like, I'm gay and I'm struggling with my sexuality, and you've been a great role model for me in that way. So then that just encourages me to then talk about things more and talk about different issues and stuff like that.
Relatable, right? Relatable.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I grew up like being very much in the closet for like many years. I didn't even openly talk about being gay like on social media until just a couple of years ago, because I did grow up in a very religious community where it was very shamed upon to like even talk about it or especially talk about it openly. So it was something that I for many years in radio, I was telling stories, but I was using like gender neutral terms in order to like not. So I was kind of like finding my way around it. And I found that with that comes a lot of shame and a lot of guilt, and you always have to second guess everything that you're saying. And there's just a lot of weight to that. So it wasn't until I just felt like I was at a point where I was like, okay, listen, I'm just going to like openly be myself. I'm going to talk about the things that are important to me. I'll still even get backlash. But for me, that until now, it's really just like fired me up to like talk about it even more and like see how important it is to talk about and share with. And I find too, like anytime I'll talk about my relationship or like past relationships that I've had or anything, people are constantly reaching out specifically due to the fact that we are gay. And I just think even now it's not portrayed enough in the media. So people are going to like online personalities and people that they see, on social media. And the fact that I felt that way even a few years ago shows that there's like still so many issues when it comes to like the LGBTQ plus community. So that only now encourages me more to talk about those things so that other people don't have to feel that same way.
When you wanted to get into radio and when you decided this was going to be your thing, like who was a role model for you based on some of those things?
Yeah. So when I was like still in the closet and I was in college and everything, that I found that there was a struggle. Like I didn't relate to too many like queer people in movies and TV shows and things like that. I mean, there was like Ellen, who was really great, but even then she was like an older person. So I didn't feel like I related to her too much on that. And so for me, it was like a lot of YouTubers. Like that was really the like generation I feel like I grew up with, was just like watching a lot of like LGBTQ plus creators on YouTube who were just like making videos about their everyday life. And then for me, I was like, oh, I can live like that. Like, oh, if I come out, like that's what my life can be like. And now I find I look back now and I'm like lucky enough to be to be friends with a lot of people that I ended up watching on YouTube because I'm like a creator now too and all of these things. So it's cool to like see that full circle moment. But there was just like pretty much anyone that I saw online that was like gay and young and cool looking. I was like, wow, I want to be just like you. So so I think I see the importance of that portrayal online for other young people. So that's what's really helped me.
If you're comfortable to share, you mentioned the word backlash, and even if it wasn't straight backlash, but just a moment of apprehension to really be yourself that was kind of tough for you to work through.
Yeah, I found that it's funny because it's more of like the community that I grew up with that I get the most backlash from. And it wasn't until I like got into radio that I was like, oh, like not everyone is gonna judge me for being gay. And it was really nice to like get into radio because it was kind of the first time that I entered the world that wasn't this like church community that I grew up in. So I really liked it. And it was really refreshing to be like, oh, there's an entire world out there of people who like are okay with people that are gay. It's crazy. So that was like a learning lesson for me. And that's like, I've always appreciated like my radio family for that. But I have found throughout my career, there has been, you can always tell and you can always sense it in a room when you're talking about something like that, and you can feel somebody get like a little bit uncomfortable. So I've definitely been in situations like that or I'll like pitch an idea for like a pride video, but like somebody won't want to shoot it and they'll come up with an excuse as to why they don't want to shoot it, but you like know in your heart why they don't want to shoot it. So there's things like that where it's not blatant and they won't say it to your face, but you see it there and you can feel it. So that's always a little tough, but you just gotta move past it and then just like talk about it even more just to make them a little more uncomfortable.
I love it. Has there been a moment where has there been a learning opportunity for someone else that you've sort of helped to educate someone else on something?
I think online I feel like and it's surprising too, because I feel like people see TikTok as like a Gen Z app where everybody's inclusive and all these things, but I have seen more homophobic people on TikTok in the last year than I like thought existed. Like anytime that I'll post about my girlfriend or I'll post about being gay or like talk about it when I'm like live streaming or anything, there's always people who come with like really ignorant questions where you can just see that they're just have never been exposed to people like that. And it's just uneducated at the end of the day. So I try and like really not be offended by things like that and like take it as an opportunity to teach people and show that like, oh yeah, a girl can have long hair and be a lesbian. Like it's not that hard to comprehend. And yeah, so I kind of have had fun with that too. Like I've collected all of like a lot of the hate comments that I've gotten and I've like turned that into a TikTok that I thought was funny and things like that. So I really try and like use it to my advantage and also like show people in a way that like, this is why these conversations still need to happen, because this is still very much a thing where people are just like blatantly homophobic on the internet and not even thinking twice about it, which is shocking because you'd think that people would be a little more skeptical to post things about that online because it's so hateful and you could lose your job for being homophobic and all of these things. So I think that it just shows that there's so much more that needs to be done. So I'll just keep talking about it until everybody is on board.
If there's one stereotype that you could destroy about being gay, what is it?
I don't know. One stereotype about being gay. That's a really good question. I feel like not all lesbians move in with each other on the second date. That's a big one that people always bring up. I don't know. That's a really good question.
That notion is even transferable to just any Toronto couple who can't afford rent. So like, get over it.
Yeah. It's like if my girlfriend was here, we're obviously going to move in together because of rent prices. It's not because we're lesbians. So I think that's a really big one. But I think there's also some like lesbian stereotypes that I see a lot of people talk about that are also very accurate. Like the fact that all lesbians are like friends with their exes. Like that is very much true. And I am like very much friends with all of my exes. So there's ones that are good too, that I'm like, I'll take that. Sure.
You know who mentioned that on this podcast?
Who's that?
Your ex.
Who I'm very good friends with and work with. So gotta love Jax.
Jax like brought it up, that like she loves all of her exes and there's just like a real friendship that always stays.
Yeah. But if you think about it at the end of the day, it's like you were with this person and you had this like very romantic relationship with them because you have this bond. So I think it should make sense for any sort of type of relationship, because you obviously were with them for a reason and you have a lot in common and all of these things. So it's like, why end that just because the relationship is over? Why do you have to like completely go your separate ways? So yeah, Jax and I have always said that from when we were together, because we were also coworkers and we own a house together and like all of these things. So we were like, if we ever break up, like we're just going to go to being best friends. And that's exactly what happened.
Knowing that there are so many things to talk about in June, one of them being Pride, is it enough to have 1 month of discussion around this in this day and age? You know, we're living in a completely different time, especially with what's gone on in the pandemic. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. And thank you for bringing that up. I think an issue that comes up and is talked about a lot in the LGBTQ plus community, especially during Pride Month, is seeing all these corporations jump on board and they change their logo to a rainbow and they say they're like going to be doing this and this for the month of June. But then as soon as the month of June is over, they switch back their logo, they like throw out all their decorations and then they go back to whatever. And it's almost become like the cool thing to do, or the quote unquote inclusive thing to do, to be involved and partake in Pride Month and like show that you're supportive. But I think we've reached a time where, and a point in life where that's just not enough. Like you can donate your money, but also start an initiative or do something and show that you're committed to supporting the LGBT community all year round, rather than in just 1 month of the year, because we're still there every single day of the rest of the year. So I think that's something that's really important. And whenever I do see like a corporation doing anything that's outside of June and not just specifically related to Pride Month, I always really will like take that to heart more, and really I'm more appreciative of it for that. So instead of just like seeing it as a trendy thing, but to actually like commit to a cause.
Maybe you can share an initiative that you really identified with, that a company started, whether it was like starting in June and continuing all year, or just starting at another time. Is there something that you would share that you really loved?
Well, I feel like, there's like things like TD Bank, for example, like they're my bank, and I specifically like chose them as my bank because I know how much they like commit to Pride things. And I was in the bank the other day and I saw that they like have all these images on screen, but they'll specifically make sure that they have like straight couples and gay couples and everything. And they talk about their inclusivity and what they're doing for the LGBTQ plus community. And they're ones that do it all year round. They definitely go hard in June, which is great to see. And they like decorate all of the banks and they cover it in rainbows and things like that. But they're definitely a company that I see like do it, definitely take advantage of it all year round.
You're seeing a commitment outside of just the month.
Yeah.
So what about radio specifically and Pride? You know, you work for one of the biggest stations in Market One in Toronto. Is there anything that you wish was still being done, or do you really feel like, you know, your properties are doing what they should?
Yeah, I feel like for the most part, like they are doing what they need to do and what they are doing to show their support. And I've always been appreciative of it for that reason. Specifically working for Bell Media, I've been working for the company now for I think about 6 years, and they've always been on board with like everything Pride related and like fighting to get like a float in the parade. And I've been lucky enough to like be on that float since I've been joined Chum. So that's been really good because I actually joined the Chum team. It was like midway through May a couple years ago. So one of the first things that I did with the whole team was get to be on the Pride float and be with like Marilyn Dennis and our entire team, and we're all just like dancing in rainbows and really celebrating. So that for me was like my own little welcome parade to like joining the team. So it's been really nice, and they've made it very known that like this is where they stand, and they are really supportive in that way. Like Jax and I will joke about how like June is just the busiest month of the year for us because we are like the queer people at work. So it's nice because our work will give us this platform and say like, okay, go and create whatever you want to do. Like it's total free reign. So it really gives us opportunities to be creative and come up with different things that we want to do and share stories of people and use the station platforms in order to do that. So it's been really nice. And I've never felt like I've been able to not talk about things or had to censor myself in any way. So I love the station for that. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful thing. What are the things that make you feel empowered and to just be yourself on the air?
Oh, I've always felt like nothing is really off limits when it comes to my on-air show. And I've always been lucky enough to have PDs, and especially my PD right now, Sarah Cummings. She hires her hosts and puts full trust in them that they're going to be able to put on a good show, and they can, yeah, she's the best. And they can talk about what they want to talk about. So I have always felt empowered in the way where it's like, if I think something is good to talk about on air, I can trust my gut that it will be. And I never have anyone telling me like, oh, maybe you shouldn't talk about that, or maybe you should avoid that, or anything like that. So I really go into my show every night, and I do just like trust my gut. And I'm like, okay, I think like this story is like something interesting, or I feel like this is important to talk about today, or this is just like a funny thing that I want to like talk about with a caller or whatever. So it's really nice in that way, because I feel very empowered and I feel very self-confident in the content that I talk about. And based on the feedback too, I'll like take that into consideration and then tweak what I'm talking about from there. But based on the audience and the feedback that I get as well, I always feel like I can talk about what I want to, and the important issues that I think are important to bring up.
What about males? We're working in a male dominant industry, and, I personally have felt very supported in the past, but there's also been moments where I can tell that they feel threatened. Or how's that experience been for you?
Yeah. And I feel the exact same way. I feel like I was saying earlier, like working for this station where I work now, we have so many women who are in leadership positions, which has been so nice. And that's the first time I've ever experienced anything like that. So I love it in that way. But and up until that point, I've like only ever worked with men. And it was maybe like myself and one other woman that was on the radio station. So I've been constantly outnumbered by men. And I've run into situations where it's like, I was hired at a station and I was working there for a while, and I was getting close with the other male hosts. And I had a night where I was hanging out with one of the other hosts, and we'd had our rise at the exact same time. We got hired at the station around the same time. We had the exact same amount of experience, similar shows and things like that. And I found out that he was making like $15,000 more a year than me, because we were just like decided to just talk about our salaries. And I was assuming that it would be the exact same, because I was like, why wouldn't it be? Right. So then finding that out, I'm like, oh, like it has to be because I'm a woman. Like there's no other reason for it to be that way. So there's been situations like that. And I think radio has always been a man's game. And that's always been something that's like known, and people, that's just like what the environment is. So I think we're reaching a time where it's progressing and it's no longer like that, but I still feel like we have a long ways to go. Yeah.
Even in Canada, like job posting wise, you rarely see a salary number posted in Canadian job postings. Whereas like if you're in the UK, it's included in every single posting. And part of me wonders if that's because like some organizations aren't ready to balance that shit out.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I've talked to a PD about it before, where we were just like talking about money, and he was saying because I think I was asking something similar about that, or like why the range is so big, because I've seen some smaller hosts get like such small salaries, and then you see other hosts make so much money. And he says it's like entirely based off your talent and your skill, and like what they think that you are specifically worth. So I don't know if that's maybe like an accurate way to go about it, but it's tough. And also with job listings too, it's like there's so many, even in radio, there's still so many opportunities. More opportunities for men in our industry, because it's so very rare that you're going to see a 2 female morning show. You're either going to see 2 guys or a guy and a girl. So that already shows that there's way more job opportunities for men in our industry. And when I've asked about that as well, a lot of PDs will be like, well, men don't want to listen to 2 women talk in the morning. Like, that's just what it is. And it's like, well, okay, then why don't we change that? Why don't we put 2 women on the air and make them listen? Reason. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, give them a reason. Or else if you don't change that, then it's never going to change. And that's always what it's going to be like. And we're never going to progress. So
I'd also like to know what data backs that up. Like, shut
right? Up. Seriously. And it's like, are we still at a point where like men don't want to listen to women? Like, it's 2021. Get with it.
I work really heavily in music programming, although I host as well. And, like there was a time I remember where like we were talking about coding songs based on female vocals and male vocals, but it was mostly because of like having a lot of female vocals back to back. And now you think about it and it's like AC/DC, Zeppelin, Black Keys, like all back to back. Like you don't have to code.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I have worked in the music department like throughout my career, and we would have, when you're scheduling music, there would be a little notification that would pop up if you have too many female songs back to back. So then you have to like separate the female voices so that it plays like every 3 songs, but then there's no such rule for men. And it's, yeah, it's ridiculous. I feel like at the end of the day, men aren't going to like be like, ugh, there's too many female songs, I'm going to switch the station. And if there is somebody like that, like, I don't want that person listening to the station anyway. It's like, get out of here.
Yeah. And at the same time, it's like, if you get females talking about the right content, it's, you know, it's foolproof.
Yeah.
I see you do some like TV stuff. You do a podcast. What's bringing you the most joy out of all the things that you do?
Oh, good question. I feel like I'm always having fun in every aspect of my job. And that's what's so nice about it. And doing so many different things, it's like always getting mixed up, and I'm always getting to talk about new things. So it's all great. My favorite thing I find that gives me the most joy, or just like leaves me on such a high, is interviewing. I like love it. So the fact that you get to interview me, it feels very weird because I'm usually on the other side of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I love so much. And just like having the opportunity to have conversations with artists that I listen to and that I'm a fan of, and then getting to listen to their album and then have all my questions, but then actually get to have a conversation face to face with them and then ask them about it. I'm like, this is crazy. Like, and it never gets old. And I've been doing it for iHeart for like the last almost 3 years now. So yeah, it's great. And it's a good challenge too, because you, as soon as I'm finished an interview, I like think about the things that I would have changed. And then I go into the next interview, like taking those skills that I've learned and then growing from there. So I feel like it's always something that you can grow and get better at. So I love that part.
I would have the same answer to that question if someone asked me. I love interviewing, and like whether it's an artist or, you know, like this is such a new thing for me, interviewing people like in my line of work. Like,
right.
What? Yeah, it's really new and really interesting. But tell me about an interview where like the connection was unreal.
I did an interview with, it's nice being able to do interviews in person, which I miss very much because I feel like that connection and the body language is there. I had an interview with Lewis Capaldi, and he is just like one of the funniest people, on top of being like an amazing singer. And we just like hit it off. Like I swore at the end of it, I was like, we're going to exchange numbers. We're going to like hang out after this, because we just like got on so well. And that's one of my most viewed videos too. And a lot of the comments are like, are they flirting? Like, what is happening here? So, and then other people will be like, she's a lesbian. And it's so funny to see that. But yeah, he's somebody for sure that I left that and I was like, wow, that was so fun. And we had such a good time. And I think that's always what I chase after now in interviews. Yeah.
Hey, tell me about a lesson learned from an interview, something that didn't go well.
Okay. That's a really good question. That is a really good question. I had one interview experience that was like the worst interview that I've ever had.
We all have one. Please don't worry.
Oh yeah, I know. And it's actually been, I was listening to the episode with you and Liz Trenier, and she was talking about bad interviews. And I was like, this is so helpful to me because now I feel like I'm not alone. So I appreciate that. But I had an interview. I can't say who the artist is because he was so mean, and I don't want to like throw him. I don't want to get yelled at by him again. But I interviewed somebody, and it was through Skype, and it was like during the pandemic, and it was very much in the beginning. So we just like did it over Skype, and he, how do I tell this story without saying who it is? So his wife came into the room right before we were about to do the interview, and we're like making small talk before like we hit record and all the things. And his wife came over and gave him a smoothie. And I said to him, before we were about to start, I was like, oh, wow, you've got it made. But he thought that I said, oh, you have a maid. He like misinterpreted what I said, and he thought that I was commenting on his wife calling her a maid, when really I just said, oh, you've got it made. Like, your wife's bringing you a smoothie. That's so nice.
Yeah.
So he was not nice during the interview, and we just like it was the opposite of Lewis Capaldi, and we just like did not have a good rapport. And I was like very confused about why he was like just not giving me anything, because I was like, I thought I had good questions and all of these things. And then afterwards he sent me a message on Skype, and he called me a lot of swear words and all of these things, and was very, very mean about the whole experience. So we had to like send it to the label and get it sorted out. But luckily enough, I had that part on video, so I could just like, I sent like my team the video being like, listen, I didn't call a woman woman a maid. Like I would never call a woman a maid. Like that's not the type of person that I am. Like, and then all of them were like, obviously you would never call a woman a maid. And then, so we got it started from there. So I think maybe a lesson to be learned and like have good internet connections so that people don't misinterpret the things that you say, or like speak clearly when you're on Zoom, because people might take, misinterpret things. So that
what about that art of like trying to get something out of someone who doesn't want to talk?
Oh, it's tough. It's such a challenge. Especially, and there'll be artists that come in too. And you understand that people, like everybody has their bad days and things, but I always try and like prove to the person that I'm interviewing that I've done my research and that their time, like I'm not taking their time for granted. So that's always something that I try and take into every interview opportunity. And I really try and do my research and really show that I know who they are and what they're about, and I'm not wasting their time. So yeah, because you don't want to run into those situations where they think that that's the case, right?
Right. Totally. Yeah. Oh, believe me, I've had my share of great connections and bad connections.
Yeah, it happens when you do as many interviews as you do, it has to come up.
Okay, with creating all this content online during a pandemic, and where Toronto is just coming into vaccination season.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about how things might change for your career, like as we return to live shows, festivals, hosting opportunities at events, and not just like virtually?
Yeah, I'm just dying to get back out there and like see people in person. I feel like that's when I can do my job the best, is in person. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I feel like I was like on this good trajectory. There we go. Yeah, maybe. With I'm a professional speaker for a living. I really thought that I felt like I was like on this trajectory, and then it all of a sudden just came to a halt, like so many other people felt like when the pandemic first hit. So I was kind of bummed out in that way, but I really wanted to not like waste this time that we had being stuck inside. So that's why I really just threw myself into social media. So it's been nice that now I can like come out of this pandemic with like a little bit more of a following online and more of an audience and like have more eyes on me. So I think that will then benefit me when we can like get back into in-person things and red carpets and all of that stuff, and then just continue to grow from there.
Oh yeah. Like you have 100% used this pandemic to your advantage.
It's been good.
As a matter of fact, I'm booking time with you after this to learn TikTok.
Yeah, perfect. We'll do lessons.
Thank you. So what was the best piece of advice that you have ever been given in this industry?
Oh, I think best piece of advice. I think something that a lot of people learn right from the beginning is that as big of a country as Canada is, our radio community is quite small. Everybody kind of knows everybody, and your name gets passed around, especially as you grow. So it's so important. And I know people have said this before, but it's so important to not burn any bridges and just be kind to every single person that you come in contact with, because as soon as you do that, then you never know if that person that you burn a bridge with is going to then become your boss in the future. So I think that's the first lesson that I learned. And then moving around in the first couple radio stations that I was at, I was like, wow, everyone is literally friends with each other and everyone knows each other and everyone's boss has worked with so-and-so and all of this stuff. And it really helps too. It's like if you build a good reputation for yourself, your name's going to get tossed in the hat when job opportunities come up and people are going to reach out to you and there's going to be more opportunities for you. So yeah, it's just that much more important. So I think I've been lucky enough in the industry to not have burned any bridges with anyone so far. We'll see. But that's the thing. Like, I feel like I'm so scared of having any bad relationships with anyone that I just am overly nice to every single person that I meet, because I never want anyone to think badly of me.
Of course. Okay. What about the advice that you would give to like a younger version of you?
Oh, I think something that I think I'm still learning, but it's something that I've been trying to remind myself more of, is just to like have more confidence in myself. I think I've spent so many years feeling like I was getting all these opportunities, but I had the whole like imposter syndrome thing where I was like, oh, I'm not deserving of the opportunities that are coming my way, or they're going to see that I'm actually like not as good as they think that I am. And then it's all going to go downhill. And then they're going to see the facade and then I'm going to lose my job and all of the things like, which, comes with any sort of person who has anxiety. So I think I spent a lot of time, and I still do, like second guessing myself and just like not trusting that I know how to do my job and that I'll do a good job at it. But it's taken years of like doing it and then looking back and being like, oh, like I did all right. Like those everything that I did, like it worked out, and I've been moving up in my career and all of these things, and other people believe in me. So I think I would just tell my younger self just to like trust yourself, because it's all going to work out and you're going to be just fine. So don't worry about it.
Yeah. It's still yet to have an episode recorded here where imposter syndrome is not mentioned, whether you're a media executive or an evening host. So I feel like that's across the board for sure.
Oh, for sure. And that even comes to like, people are like asking me advice on TikTok and things like that. And I'm like, I don't know how it happened. Like I'm still asking myself these questions. So it's like when it's the same thing where in anything that I go in, I'm like, I don't know anything. And people are like, okay, well, you must know something. And I'm like, okay, I'll figure it out. But
okay, to end, before I get your take on some other fabulous women who I should have on the podcast, what's your proudest moment in radio so far?
That's a really good question. My proudest moment. I came out on air, which was always that really.
Tell me the story.
Yeah. So I just like, I was going through the time where I like was always talking gender neutral terms on air, and my close friends all knew that I was gay, and I was working in Edmonton, and our morning show was Ian and Chelsea at the time, and they were like two really close friends of mine. So I was really talking to them, and I was going back and forth about how I was like very scared to talk about being gay publicly, especially in Alberta where it's so conservative and you never really know how people are going to react. But I wanted to like finally just reach that point where I could just like talk about it and be like, okay, here, like I didn't want to just go on air and all of a sudden start talking to like a girlfriend and then people be like, what? So I felt like I had to like say something. So they gave me the opportunity to go on air in the morning show and just like speak my truth and say that I'm gay and talk about it a little bit and share that with them. So that was like an emotional experience, because that was the first time, like I'd never talked about it online or anything. It was mainly just like close friends that I'd known.
This is when you were an evening host?
Yeah.
Okay.
In Edmonton. Yeah. So I was evening host, or yeah, I would have been an evening host at that time. So yeah. So they let me come on the morning show and we just like talked about it and had a really good conversation, and it was really great. So that was kind of just like a weight lifted after that. So that one was good. And then also I got to meet Oprah. So for me, that was a personal one.
Yeah. Okay. So Oprah is just, she's, I don't even have words for Oprah.
Yeah. Oh, don't even get me started.
Yeah. So did you have like an exchange with her, or you were just viewing from afar?
No, I got to go meet her because my coworker Sam and I actually were both like huge Oprah fans, and she ended up tweeting at Oprah when her show got canceled in Toronto, and Oprah saw it and then tweeted her back, inviting her to her Montreal show. So she took me with. So I was very much just like the guest of this thing that was going on. But Sam East, who's on Virgin, she actually had the opportunity to then interview Oprah for E-Talk, which was insane. And then I just got to go to the meet and greet and meet her. But for me, I was like, my career helped me get here, so I'm going to take this as a win. And yeah, I got to have like a full conversation with her, and I just sobbed in her arms, and she hugged me, and it was like everything that I ever dreamed that it would be. And I got to tell her all the things I'd wanted to say to her, and it was magical.
What are some of those things that you needed to say to Oprah?
Yeah. Okay. Well, if we want to get really deep, I had like a really traumatic like teenage years in like my home life, and that involved like sexual assault and sexual abuse and all of that stuff. And then and her show always covered those topics. So because of watching her show every day after school, I was able to like mentally wrap my head around the things that were happening to me at home. And I think that really helped me in like my journey of going through all of that. And it gave me the courage to like speak up about the abuse that was happening. So I just like always wanted to thank her for that, because I was like, she's so much a part of the reason that I was able to talk about it openly. So when I met her, I was like, we like had our hug and whatever. And then I was like, okay, Oprah, I just have to tell you, I have to thank you for all of these things. And like, just like blurted it all out. And then she like asked me questions about it. And then we had like a good, like 2-minute conversation about it. I was like, I'll take that.
2 minutes with Oprah is money.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And I got to like say all the things that I'd always wanted to say to her. So in that moment, I was like, this is the best. I love this.
I love that. So the end of this podcast, try to give some space to some other women who you think I should bring on the podcast. What do you think?
Yes. Okay. So there's so many people that I had in mind that I already know are getting shout outs or have gotten shout outs. So because there's so many incredible women in our industry. So I'm glad that everybody is getting that recognition.
The guest list, I will say, is just like, I have like a guest list that I have to still work through. So don't feel bad if it ends up being a repeat. It's okay to give kudos to someone.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say, you probably like, this is such a good idea because now you just have like endless guests for the podcast. But I don't know if this person has been mentioned, but Ashley Greco, who is our afternoon host on Chum, she is just the best. And she's so creative and so funny and amazing. And she also does a syndicated show as well on our Move stations. So she's somebody that I have to shout out because she's incredible in many ways. Also, Lisa Keys. I don't know if you
voiceover artist
Lisa Keys. Yeah, she's a very close friend of mine. We've lived together for years and years when in Edmonton and then again in Toronto. And she is just like, her work ethic is insane. Her voicing abilities is crazy. And yeah, she's just like overall just such
her energy. She's got great energy. And you know what? I'm really interested in, her journey from radio to just voiceover and taking on her own business. So that'd be such an interesting episode.
Yeah, I totally think so too. And just like hearing how she did it all and what she's doing now and like the work that she puts into it is just crazy. Yeah, cool. She's so good. I was just talking to her yesterday actually, because I'm trying to like soundproof rooms and I'm like, you're the person to talk to. Like you're just voicing constantly in your house. So she's really good. Okay. And then another person that I want to mention is a girl named Joss Richard. She is, she's worked in Toronto in television, and then she moved to LA to go work for the Ellen Show, and she's worked for Walt Disney, and she's really just done a lot of work in media. But since then, she's started her own organization that's called Margo Community, which I'm lucky enough to be a mentor for. And what it is, it's like an inclusive online network that helps women and gender marginalized individuals like find mentors. So it's really and it's all about like normalizing women getting paid to be a mentor, because I feel like in this industry, we're always reaching out to people and like trying to pick their brains and like jump on calls with them to like gain any sort of knowledge. But so she's created this organization where you can go on this website and whatever it is that you're interested in, you can find a person that relates to that field, and then you can pay them for a session or a few sessions to talk to them and pick their brains about what they do and then help you then grow in whatever industry that you're in. So it's like such a great thing that, as soon as I heard about it, I was like, yes, like this is amazing. So yeah, and I'm really glad to be a part of it. So I think she's somebody who's definitely worth talking to.
Thank you so much. I love that you're an open book because, whether you're sharing stuff on your show or social media, like it's easy to feel like what Shannon Burns is about. And I love that's an authenticity piece, right? Which I feel like everyone in radio, that's the goal. That's always the goal, is authenticity.
Yes, that's the best compliment. So thank you for having me on. I'm a huge fan of the podcast.
The beautiful thing about this little nomination process you're hearing at the end of the episodes is I've been introduced to so many fabulous women who I didn't even know existed. My next guest was nominated by Tracy Martin in episode 2, and she's the VP of Live Music and Events for Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. As you know, I've had a lot of hosts and those in the spotlight on the show lately. And with Melissa Bub Clark, who's up next, she's making some pretty big calls behind the scenes in a role that combines the best of sports and entertainment. Please subscribe to the Women in Media podcast on your favorite service so you get a heads up when a new episode has been published. And until the next one with Melissa Bub Clark, thanks for listening.
I'm Jeff Woods, and I'm shining a light on music and the rock stars who make it.
He just was one of those people, he stood out.
He was a magic guy. He really was a magic guy. We all have faults. He had the same amount of faults as we all had.
This was before Led Zeppelin. Robert was full on. I mean, he was Led Zeppelin without the band behind him. He had the hair, the jeans, the whole thing, and he was amazing.
The Records and Rockstars podcast, heard around the world and yours to hear wherever you get podcasts. All the episodes from jeffwoodsradio.com.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.